Hello Internet, it's Trix from the Foxerie with another video. Stay tuned. Internet, great to see you again. Trix here. This video is called Influences on the Ego. This video is conceptually maybe a little bit challenging to comprehend, but I will try my best, as is my skill set in explaining the complex. So, what do we know from previous videos? Conscious actual, which is our primary psychic container, contains the world, or what we call the world. In the middle is the ego. The ego being the central psychic structure for I, for me, for self. Normally, when we think about things that influence us, we tend to think about stuff in the world. If it's too hot, I'll move somewhere cool. If it's too cold, I will move somewhere warm. If I'm hungry, I will go get some food. If I do not like that person, I will move away from them, and so on. These are the things we generally think of as influencing the self or influencing the ego. However, in Foxerie, there's things that you're going to learn about that influence the ego inside the psyche. In the last video, The Gods Within, one of the points that I'm not sure if I got across to you was that these gods, these four, holds up 10 fingers because I'm a genius, these four gods are separate entities that exist alongside the ego in the psyche. Furthermore, these entities influence the ego. That's right, things inside you are influencing you. Things that you didn't even know about. I mean, you get a feeling of hunger, that's kind of an internal feeling. You get irritation, that's a feeling as well. And you get a bit, amorous, we could say. That's another internal feeling. But these psychic entities influence you in ways that you have no idea. Now, they can be negative. They can influence you in ways you don't want to be influenced. However, they are also engines for the ego. The ego has no power. The ego has very little volition, has very little oomph, impetus to do stuff, motivation, etc. So getting the ego to do stuff is actually quite hard unless you learn how to tap into these engines. However, you've got to be a bit careful because tapping into the engines has a few risks. Anyway, I'm going to quickly go through in principle how this works without getting too specific in this particular video. Let's just choose, for example, the God of Wisdom. Now, most people say, in plain everyday English when they're talking to friends or family, I thought this or I thought that. When I think about this, blah, blah, blah. What they don't often realize is the ego doesn't actually think. Isn't that interesting? What happens is the ego is influenced by its intelligence, and the intelligence in this model is called the God of Wisdom. So to put this into a more sort of comprehensive model, you might say the God of Wisdom influences the ego with your intelligence. You could even say the God of Wisdom talks to the ego or explains stuff to the ego. So the God of War influences the ego into aggression. The God of Love influences the ego into passion and sexuality. The God of Power influences the ego into control, into making plans for the future, into taking charge of its life, and so on. These four psychic entities do this relatively unseen by the ego. What we're going to be learning about in self-transformation is the very specific ways these entities are trying to influence the ego all the time. And we're going to try and use them to our advantage in order to transform the self. The other thing too that you'll be interested to learn is if you have negative behaviors, things that you do that you're not happy about, it will probably turn out that you're already being influenced by one of these four gods in a way that isn't serving you. For example, let's just choose the easy example, the god of war, which is your aggressive impulses. If you're very uncomfortable with aggression and you've sort of tried to banish that god, so to speak, it doesn't go away, internet. It goes into the shadows, you could say, and it starts to work on the ego quietly. It starts to criticize the ego. It starts to put unpleasant ideas into your dreams and into your thoughts, and on and on. It can be quite a destructive force if left unchecked. So what we're going to do in subsequent videos is we're going to explore ways not only in which you can use these engines to have a good life, but we're going to examine if these engines are at work at the moment, leading you astray, making your life miserable, and perhaps even you'll discover you might be completely disconnected from all of these engines, and that will make you flat, it will make you depressed, it will make you not care particularly about your life, about your future. You know, you can range a whole bunch of clinical stuff based on that one thing alone, not being plugged in, so to speak. Okay, I reckon that is a pretty good start to influences on the ego. I think in the next series of videos, we'll try and go into some specifics. How is the God of wisdom influencing you? How is the God of war doing it? The goddess of love, the God of love, the God of power, and so on. And what is it creating in your world? And what's going to happen if you disconnect? What's going to happen in your world? All right, I'm getting absolutely eaten alive by mosquitoes, internet. And you don't want that because I'm so beautiful. All right, that's it.